Welcome, no regrets. My name is Jake Lee, and I have the privilege today of introducing Jeff Manion. Jeff is the senior pastor at Ada Bible Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. He's just on the other side of the pond. And some things about Jeff is that he enjoys hiking, cycling, running, which I don't enjoy any of those except hiking, so props. And he is also married to his wife, Chris. They have 3 adult children, and they are proud grandparents, which is pretty exciting. That's a really cool thing. And he's also authored a number of books, one being The Land Between, Satisfied, and also Dream Big, Think Small, which is what he's going to talk about today. This idea that in our culture, we're infatuated with overnight success and seeing results immediately. But when you look, well, you're going to talk about when you look in the Bible, like, a lot of it's this steady, faithful movement forward, and that's where you have the most influence, and that's what's most important. So would you please join me in welcoming Jeff to the stage?
Yeah, thanks, man. Well, hey, so good to be with you. So good to be with you this afternoon. And just a little bit more background. My wife, Chris, and I, we have served this church outside of Grand Rapids, Ada Bible Church, for this is our 36th year of ministry there. And so we were 21-year-old college students, graduated from high school in Northern California, went to Michigan for Bible school. We thought as soon as Bible school was done, we were headed back, and this church of 20 people called and asked me if I'd fill in, and I said yes, and then they said, would you fill in for 2 more weekends? And I said yes again, and they said, would you be willing to stay until we find a real pastor? They're still looking, you know. And so our whole adult lives have been spent with one ministry. Another little important fact is that it took us, today we're like over 8,000 people with 4 campuses. It took us 7 years to get over 100 consistently. And so our whole 20s were spent just chipping away at this thing, trying to get it moving. And we've experienced some significant breakthroughs over the years, a new building, a new opportunity or something, but these breakthroughs have always been bracketed by these lengthy time periods of just faithfully chipping away. And so I've grown to believe that overnight success is a myth. There's rarely a quick fix. And faithfulness, this thing called faithfulness, it's not a sexy virtue. It's not a flashy virtue, but look at any dynamic organization, company, or school, and I swear at the center of that are a group of individuals who dug in and were consistent over a very lengthy period of time. I'm not talking about something that rockets into the air and then explodes. I'm talking about enduring organizations. You can always find at least a small core of people that just brought it again and again and again and again over a considerable period of time. And so what I want to impress upon you, if you take nothing else away, is just faithfulness matters. It matters in schools, and it matters in communities, and it matters in families, and it matters in churches. Faithfulness matters. And so I just want to begin with a picture of this guy right here that you should know, maybe, depending on your age. Anyone know who this dude is? Okay. Fred Rogers, all right, popularized again because of the Tom Hanks movie last year where he plays Fred Rogers, so this guy's not leaving the news anytime soon. But Fred Rogers did a daily television program, children's program, called Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and he did that for 33 years. He had a 33-year run. We're talking 1968 to 2001, right before he died of cancer. And in that 33-year run, he had the same entrance drill every single stinking day. The piano music begins to play. Fred Rogers walks through the door, smile and a wave, walks down the stairs, opens a closet. As he sings his theme song, I'm not going to make you sing, dude, don't worry. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, right? He's singing the song, comes down, opens up the closet, takes off his suit jacket, hangs it up, takes out a sweater, puts the sweater on, zips it up, comes around to the front. There's a bench there, sits down on the bench, takes off a dress shoe, puts on a tennis shoe, takes off the other dress shoe, puts on another tennis shoe. As he wraps up the song, would you be mine? Would you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor? And this was his entrance drill for 33 years. Why? See, Fred Rogers knew that there were a lot of kids watching his program that came from really stable homes. You wake up in the morning, there'd be a mom there or a dad there, maybe both. Someone would be there to shuttle kids off to school. You'd get home from school, be reasonably assured that an adult would be there during the evening, someone to set Cheerios out in the morning, something else in the evening. A lot of his viewers, young viewers, came from stable homes, and a lot of his viewers came from absolute chaos. Never knew who was going to be there. Very little consistency, very little regimentation, and very little routine. And see, Fred Rogers believed that the world was not a safe place, that you were going to experience loss, that you were going to experience anger, and you would have to figure out what to do with those emotions. And so he figured that kids were going to figure it out early enough that the world was not a safe place, and that they would need a guide, that they would need a coach, that they would need a neighbor to help them process what was going on in life. And this is the way, I mean, for some of those kids, he was the most structure that they had in their lives. And the daily routine that never changed was just kind of like, listen, when you take your coat off, there's a place to hang it up. When you take your shoes off, there's a place that you go. And he was teaching order and repetitive action and through his daily routines and daily disciplines. And I would say that Fred Rogers, this is how he served for 33 years. And I think served is a good term to use. Don't know if you knew this. He was an ordained Presbyterian minister. Presbyterian Church ordained Fred Rogers to serve families through the medium of television, and this is the way he served. But the entrance routine, take off the coat, hang it up, put on the sweater, zip it up, take off the shoes, set them there, put on. I don't know. Would you get sick of that, say, after 8 years? We just want to walk in, jump over the couch, and say, okay, let's just get this started, right? And then double that to 16 years, double that to 32, and you're closing in on the length of time that Fred Rogers did this same entrance routine. 4 Daytime Emmy Awards. He won the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest award you can get as a civilian, as non-military award. He was inducted into the Television Hall of Fame. He had musical guests on his show like Wynton Marsalis and Yo-Yo Ma, and you're like going, dude, really? We're talking sock puppets here. And many of the songs he wrote and performed himself. And what I would like to suggest is that Fred Rogers should be for us the new kind of hero. Fred Rogers should be the type of person when you say, he latched onto something that was good, he stuck with it for a considerable period of time. None of his programs were earth-shattering. It was the consistency, it was the faithfulness, it was the holy repetition that built the legacy that he had. And the reason I think it's so needed today is because Amazon Prime has wrecked us. It's like we want everything yesterday. We are addicted to immediacy. We're allergic to boredom. And looking at men and women in the face and just saying, listen, you do realize something, right? It is probable that your highest impact in life and your greatest influence will probably be from showing up and doing pretty much the same thing over and over and over and over again, and often with the same people. It's like a family. Talk to a family of grade school age kids and say, describe a Monday morning. They go, well, we get them up, we get them fed, we get them dressed, and we send them off. Really? That's a Monday? Yeah. Oh, what's a Tuesday look like? We get them up, we get them fed, we get them dressed, we send them off. Really, what's a Wednesday look like? It looks like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day. It's like so many days feel like so many other days. Describe an evening. We try to wrestle them into their bedrooms and get them down for the evening. Often we pray with them. Sometimes we read. But there's this day after day after day after day after day nature of what it means to be a faithful, consistent, ordered family. And I don't know how you can get away from it as a mom or dad. Just this, and then you do it again, and then you do it again, and then you do it again. Now, every once in a while, you can go to someplace you've never been before, a restaurant you've never been before, a vacation you've never been before, but those are the things you do around the edges. At the center, there's this core of sameness. And so I just plead with men and women who desire to have an impact in other people's lives just to master the mundane and to bring your best self to common, ordinary, good tasks again and again and again. And as soon as I say that, I just know that there are people that go, no, Jeff, in the Bible, people just lurch from one spectacular, monumental, miraculous event to the next. I go, do they? So I just want to reacquaint you with a character from the Bible, and I want to show you a verse that chances are you've skipped over in his life. Dude's name is Samuel, Old Testament character. Any familiar with Samuel in the Bible? First time the Bible introduces us to Samuel, he's not a grown man and a leader. He's a little kid. And he's a little kid that his mom drops off at the tabernacle to serve. Literally, it says a child in a linen ephod. What that means is you're strolling through the tabernacle area and you look over and a little kid runs by in a priest outfit. And you go, what's up with that? Samuel is a boy priest. And by the way, I don't know if this happens in your ministries, but people try this all the time to drop their kids off for the church to raise. Usually not when they're little, but usually when they're about 13. They go, we're done. They're yours. No. So, but then there's this deal where Samuel's going to sleep one night. Some of you know the story, right? And he hears his voice. Someone yells, Samuel, Samuel. So he jumps up and he runs off to Eli the priest, the high priest, and says, you called me. And Eli goes, no, I didn't. Get back to bed. Samuel goes back to bed, and then he hears a voice again, Samuel, Samuel. He jumps up and he runs to Eli the priest. And he says, you called me. And Eli says, no, I did not. Get back to bed. And a third time, Samuel hears this voice, Samuel, Samuel. And so he runs to Eli the priest. And at this point, Eli's going, oh, no. He says, okay, the next time you hear that voice, instead of running to me, do any of you know what he's supposed to say? Say what? Say, anybody, depending on the translation using, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. Speak, Lord, for your servant hears. And now Samuel goes back to bed. Right? And he hears, Samuel, Samuel. And he says, Lord, talk. I'm listening. Your servant is listening. And Samuel receives a prophecy about the nation. And then all of a sudden you go, oh my goodness, this isn't just a child priest. Now he's a child prophet. God is going to speak to people through him. And you go, oh my goodness, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? What's going to happen next with this child prophet? And what happens next is that Samuel disappears from the story for 3 or 4 chapters. Totally disappears. It's like Israelites go to war with the Philistines, the Ark of the Covenant gets stolen, it travels all over Philistia, and it finally comes back. And when that episode is over, we open the Bible and we see Samuel, but he's no longer a kid. He's a man, and he's calling the nation to repentance. How long are we going to chase idols? How long are we going to chase other gods? And God is using his prophetic adult voice to call the nation back to repentance. And Samuel, the man, he launches a national revival. And you're going like, okay, 2 stories. Count them with me, 2 stories so far. Got Samuel, a little kid. Here, Lord, your servant is listening. Now you got Samuel, the man, leading national revival. And you go, okay, what's going to happen next? What's going to happen next? And what happened next is this, from 1 Samuel chapter 8, verse 1. When Samuel grew old, he appointed his sons as Israel's leaders. There's the life of Samuel. When he grew old, he appoints his sons to leave Israel. And you go, whoa, time out. Where did the guy's life go? What did he do? In the preceding verses at the very end of chapter 7, we are told where Samuel's life went. And here it is. Samuel continued as Israel's leader all the days of his life. From year to year, he went on a circuit from Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, judging Israel in those places. That's where his life went. Welcome, my friends, to Samuel's circuit. Now, there's a map here. It's not important for you to remember where those are. I just need you to see this triangle in your mind. Year after 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 year, he went on this circuit. Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, judging Israel in those places. It says, judging Israel in those places, I believe that it was something judicial that he did. Step into a community in Gilgal and say, hey, how things are going? Well, what's going is this family offended this family, and we need someone to judge this situation and to bring justice to it before an altercation turns into a tribal war. And he would bring justice to a situation. But in addition, the term in the Bible used for a judge, the judges, it was spiritual leadership. And I just imagine Samuel arriving in the town and going, hey, we might have a problem here. A couple valleys over, there's an altar being built. That's not an altar to Baal, is it? You all aren't going over there, are you? And if anyone's here responsible for building it, could you please be responsible for tearing it down? Bethel, Gilgal to Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal to Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal to Mizpah. That's where the dude's life was spent. I think it's what we find him doing when he's 37. I think it's what he's doing when he's 43. I think it's what he's doing when he's 52. And I think it's what he's doing when he's 64. Welcome to Samuel's circuit. The scripture tells us that when Samuel died, the nation went into mourning. It seems to me that so many of us, we want to live great lives, but we make a mistake. Because we want to live great lives, we look for something great to do. We look for that moment when we're discovered. We look for that moment when our very unique gifting aligns with a certain opportunity. It makes sense, doesn't it? We want to do something great. We look for something great to do. But meanwhile, a whole parade of good opportunities goes by us. Unseen, unregistered, and unseized. Because we don't want to commit our lives to doing something good. We want to commit our lives to doing something great. And so we wait. And what I want to suggest to you is that those of us who will arrive at greatness will probably not live great lives because we see something great to do, but we find something good to do and we apply ourselves to it over and over and over and over and over and over again. What if you arrive at greatness not through doing something great, but what if you arrive at greatness through a lengthy corridor of goodness? Now, there's a French priest from the 1700s. His name was Francois Fenelon. And I just love this quote by Fenelon where it says, I've got it recorded in my book, Dream Big, Think Small. It says, great acts of virtue are rare because they are so seldom called for. Great acts of virtue are rare because they are so seldom called for. What does he mean by that? Great acts of virtue. You're driving down the street. You see a house that's on fire. Not terrible fire, just enough fire to run in and rescue someone and bring them out. And you've rescued someone from that fire. He says great acts of virtue are rare because now you can drive around for a lot of years without finding the house at the appropriate level of flame. And he says it's rare because just those opportunities just don't pull a drowning person from a lake. It just doesn't provide. It's hard to schedule that for next Thursday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? So Fenelon says to do small things that are right continually without being noticed is much more important. Notice his cadence there, to do small things that are right continually. Much more important. The rest of the quote is this: faithfulness in the little things better proves your love for God. It is the slow, plodding path rather than the passing fit of enthusiasm that matters. This slow, plodding path. It's why in the book Dream Big, Think Small, I have ants carrying the word small along the bottom. It's ant power. In Proverbs 30, where the crafter of the proverb says, go to the ant hill. Ants are creatures of little character, and yet they store up food for the winter. You can just imagine a dad kneeling down over an anthill with his 8-year-old son and saying, come here, watch the ants with me. They go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the dad looks up to his son and said, we will be like the ants. Because in an agrarian culture of the Old Testament, you were just a couple bad harvests away from financial disaster. We will be like the ants. My publisher wouldn't let me, but I wanted to subtitle the book that will change your life in about 6 years. Because it's this repetitive faithfulness thing. So I want to do something now, and I want to ask you about your circuit. Samuel circuit, Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal, Mizpah. Let me talk to you about your circuit. Is there anything that you are doing positively and in a life-giving way in family or in ministry or in business and your work that is something good, it's life-giving to others, but you have to do it with nauseating repetition? It's as if above your head hangs a plaque that says, and then he did it again, and then he did it again, and then he did it again. I would like you to be able to focus on one or at most two things as part of your circuit. Chase 25 ideas. You're not going to crush any of them. Chase after one or two things to establish in your life or to establish for the first time. And it is possible that you would make tremendous progress given enough time. So just starter question. Is there anything in your life right now that is part of your circuit, and yet it's old and it's boring? And you go, I must have done this 500 times, and yet it's still good to do. Try to identify what that might be, and just say, that's just part of my circuit. That's just part of my circuit. My world, I started pastoring this church when I was 21 years old. It's a church 20. Now it's much larger. What it means to be senior pastor of this group has changed wildly over the years. And yet there is one aspect that is identical to what I'm doing now at 57 to what I was doing when I was 21. And it has to do with getting my butt into a chair for multiple hours a week to open the scriptures and study them, and then to stand in a weekend service and communicate the scriptures. And if I said, how many years of my life have I now spent in that chair, thumbing through this book, absorbing it, in order to stand up and teach? Here's the deal. It doesn't have to be new to be good. What I'm saying here is this. If everything has to be new and interesting all the time, we will forfeit our right to our greatest impact and influence. If everything has to be new and interesting all the time. So I want to ask you a question. I'll say, what is your circuit? What is your circuit? And what I would like to do is to just give a series of ideas. Not that this should be part of your circuit, but it might jog you a little bit just to be able to go, dude, I absolutely know one thing that I could chase down and commit myself to and do with repetition, whether I feel like it or not. And so the series of illustrations I'm about to go through, I'm not prescribing these for you. I'm just describing different things that different people could latch onto, and perhaps one of these could motivate you in the next lengthy run of your life. So let's start here. Reading the Bible tomorrow won't help you. People in my church are often shocked when I tell them that. Reading the Bible tomorrow probably won't help you. Because in doing anything for a day doesn't help you that much. Exercising for a day, dieting for a day, you understand what I'm saying? But the person that did the math and just went, okay, there are 1,189 chapters in the Bible. Someone that was committed to reading a chapter a day, ant power, a chapter a day, would get through the Bible about once every 3 years. Someone who committed to that as a 30-year-old would do it about 3 times during their 30s and 3 times during their 40s. And suddenly, you become very familiar with, you become a man of the Word. And you go, how did that happen? And it wasn't anything massive and cataclysmic and catastrophic. It was just that daily discipline, chapter a day, chapter a day, chapter a day. And right now, even as I describe this, some of you are dying. You say, oh, I've tried that 3 times. I got stuck in Leviticus. Oh, my goodness. If I have to face one more genealogy, Well, another dude says, the life of Jesus. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Add up the total chapters of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It's about 90. I think it's 89. You go, 1 chapter a day. I would read through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John about every 3 months. At the end of a year, I would have read through all 4 Gospels 4 times. Every Gospel includes the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus. You would have traveled through Jesus' self-giving death on the cross and his resurrection like 16 times. And so when I say reading the Bible tomorrow probably won't help you, it's because doing anything for a day doesn't help you. But even someone that said, I'm going to read the Gospels, and I'm going to read them again, and I'm going to read it again, and I'm going to read it again, and I just want to get to know Jesus. Over time, this is massive. There's a discipline I have, so let's set that discipline down for a moment. I journal, not every day, but I bet I'm like 4 to 5 days a week most weeks. I don't journal because I like to journal. I journal because I pray badly. I got this little ADD thing going on where it's like, dear Lord, please help Phil. And then all of a sudden I'm texting Phil. And then I'm looking through the refrigerator for a bagel. And I'm going, did I say amen? And so what a journal does for me, and just like 1 page a day, is it just kind of forces me to put incoherent thoughts and ideas into legible sentences. But one thing I started doing years and years ago, was every day that I journal, writing down 3 unique things that I'm grateful for. Not like, my house, my car, my kids, my house, my car, my kids, my house, my car, my food, my kid, but just, the French toast I had this morning. Oh, Jesus, thank you. I got to play with my granddaughter yesterday. What a gift. That encouraging email that I got when I thought that was headed south, and it's just so good that person is healthy. 3 very unique things, often things in nature. Sunrise, warm days, beautiful snow covering the landscape. Often it's a relationship. Often it is a specific food item. I didn't start that practice years ago because I'm the gold standard for gratitude. I started it because I thought the opposite was becoming true. I found myself aging and taking stuff for granted. And in my mind, somewhere back probably 10 years ago, I said, I don't want to be that ungrateful old guy. And so I just commit, my take is that the blessings of God are zipping through my life by the hundreds, and once a day I just stop and grab 3 of them as they go zipping by. Now, it's not simply that gratitude is good. Remember, good movement pushes out bad movement. My friends, it's what gratitude pushes out. Gratitude is an obsession with what is going right. Complaint is an obsession with what is going wrong. Worry is an obsession with what might go wrong. And envy is an obsession with what is going right for everybody else but me. And so as I do this gratitude practice over and over and over and over and over and over and over, it retrains the channels of the heart to be able to recognize the blessings of God that are bombarding my life. And over time, it begins to push out complaint, worry, and envy, particularly on those days when it looks like everybody has a better life than I do, right? So what I want to say emphatically and clearly is that I almost never feel a monumental effect from one gratitude exercise. Okay, Manion, write down the 3 things you're thankful for today. I'm thankful for this. I'm thankful for my granddaughter. I'm thankful for the French toast. I'm thankful for a beautiful sunrise today. All right, didn't that change you? No, not really. Don't you feel closer to God? A little bit, maybe. It's what happens doing it over and over and over. It's Samuel's circuit, Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal to Mizpah, Bethel, Gilgal to Mizpah. It changes the heart over time. So maybe that's one that you latch onto. I have no idea what you're going to be called to in this next season. But if you have a heart that is prone to worry and prone to complaint and prone to envy, maybe that could serve you well over time. One other idea here, I want to coach you in how to give $100,000 away. Some of you are saying, I have always wanted the kind of money that would allow me to give $100,000 away. I can't tell you how to give $100,000 away. I'll tell you how my wife and I gave $100,000 away. And it wasn't all at one time. When we were 21-year-old newlyweds, pastoring a very small church, which finally our salary got up to $22,000 a year and stayed there forever as we tried to get this church off the ground. We embraced a life discipline that's called tithing. You've heard the term tithing? Tithing is the life discipline of living off 90% of your income so that 10% is totally at God's disposal. Tithing is the life discipline of restricting your expenses to 90% of what's coming in so that 10% can be given away. And in our very early 20s, when we started having kids early, and when you say you have no right to be pursuing generosity, we turned into these 10% people. And so did the math, $22,000, 10% of $20,000 over years, $2,200, right? But in weekly checks, he's like $42 a week. Written again and 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 again. We're talking a couple of pizzas, depending on where you buy your pizza. Little Caesars, a whole bunch of pizzas. And then when the church finally took off and we got a raise, it was larger income, larger check. And then again as a church, larger income, larger check. And we figured out somewhere when we passed age 45, we had given our first $100,000 away. But there isn't one check that a church treasurer would hold up and go, wow, $42. That's life-changing. It's the way it compounds over time. Those of you that have not yet embraced consistent, faithful generosity, if you think you're generous because you have generous moments, we gave $500 to that organization. I'm telling you, just giving the small checks repeatedly over time, you'll crush what you would do just with generous moments. And so if you said, okay, dude, this Samuel Circuit thing, this life faithfulness, this do it again and again and again and again and again and again, and over time it has an impact. Okay, dude, what's that look like to you? I would go, the gratitude exercise, Bible reading that I do every day, patterns of generosity that we've accelerated way past the 10% mark when we reached a certain income and our kids deserted us. And I just can't say enough about the habits. It's not what you do. It's what you do and 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 do that can often make the biggest difference. A couple last things, just to throw a couple things out. Can I see your hands if you have school-age kids? School-age kids. And some of you have one child, some have multiple children. Picking a date day, whether it's like a different kid every Saturday morning for a donut run or late Friday afternoon or something like that, if you have freedom in your schedule. Again, it might not be astronomical change when you in a relationship one day, but if you have little kids and you do it over and over and over, a lot of times some of the best conversations come out of the quantity of time. And you can't say, hey, pile in the car, we're going to have a deep conversation. It may or may not happen that day, but often with enough time, those better conversations come. And so there's an idea, a date day. If you find yourself driving the people you work with and that work for you, and you don't find yourself being a person of gratitude toward them, I know people that have said, I will write one stinking thank you every single day. And it's not, hey, attaboy. It's like, hey, I really appreciate this about you. One a day. And they find themselves all the way to the car. Nope, forgot it. Go back to the airlock. Stand inside. I'm not grateful for nobody today. Who am I grateful for? And and then thumbing in a thank you note. Here's the craziness. 5 years later, someone says, you know, Wally, he is one of the most encouraging people I've ever met. And Wally's going, you got to be kidding me. Because he didn't start the practice because he was an encouraging person. He started the practice because someone was bold enough to say, you demand and you drive and you never say thanks and you never encourage us. And this practice came out of that. And once again, suddenly, 4 years later, 5 years later, 6 years later, he is known as one of the most encouraging people these people ever met. But it's not what we do in a day. It's again and again and again and again. So let me show you a picture of another guy. And what I want to do is talk about Samuel's circuit. It's the same principle, but I want to use a tiny bit different language. And this picture, he looks like kind of a serious guy, doesn't he? Very serious guy. That, my friends, is Roald Amundsen. He's Norwegian. And in the year 1911, no one had ever been to the South Pole. And so there's a race to the South Pole by two different countries. The Norwegians are racing there under the leadership of that guy, Roald Amundsen, and the British are racing there simultaneously under the leadership of a guy by the name of Robert Falcon Scott. And so if you are a connoisseur of the writings of Jim Collins, he writes about this illustration, so I'm like totally ripping him off in his book, Great by Choice, all right? And so, but there was a massive, and the next picture here is the Norwegians planting their flag on the South Pole. The Norwegians won the race there. What's interesting is not simply that both of these countries, both of these teams are racing to the South Pole. What is interesting is the difference in strategies in getting to the South Pole. The British team would hammer as many miles as they could possibly go on the good days, and then when a storm blew in, they would hunker down and wait out the storm. And so it might be 0 miles, 45. Amundsen's strategy was to try to go between 15 and 20 miles every single day, regardless of the weather and regardless of the elements. All right, so if you looked at their journals would be reflective of this. Here's Scott's journal entry one day where Scott says, this British team, I doubt if any party could travel in such weather. And there was only one other party out there, right? It's just kind of like this blizzard conditions. I doubt if any other party could like get out and fold up the tents and travel in this weather. On a very similar day, we have a journal entry from Amundsen where he writes this: it has been an unpleasant day, storm, drift, and frostbite. It's been unpleasant today. Storm, drift, and frostbite, but we have advanced 13 miles closer to our goal. It's been a nasty day, but hey, we made 13 miles. All right. What's really interesting to me is that Amundsen, the Norwegian team, they not only use this 15 to 20 as a goal, they also used it as a restriction. If they got out and it was a beautiful day And they went 20 miles, and it was only noon. And they go, come on, man, we can do. No, stop. And the reason for that was because if his guys redlined physically, and a storm blew in, and they couldn't find their next supply depot, there was nobody coming for help. And so he used 20 miles as a restriction. And this is what Jim Collins, in that book, Good to Great, A Great by Choice, what he calls the 20-mile march. The 20-mile march. And Jim Collins, I've heard him ask business leaders just a question, what's your 20-mile march? What is it you just awaken in every day and go, no, that's just something I do. It's something I do whether I feel like it or not. It's something I do whether the sun's shining or whether there's a blizzard. That's just something I do. What's your 20-mile march? Craziness of the story. Amundsen gets back to base camp, South Pole, and then back to base camp on the same day that he had predicted they would arrive. Robert Falcon Scott, his entire team died in the ice, just 11 miles short of a life-saving depot where they had some goods that were cached. And so it's just kind of Samuel Circuit Round 2. I just want to ask, what's your 20-mile march? What is something in your life, in your marriage, with your kids, with your church, with people that you disciple, something at work, something at business that's good, it's life-giving to others, and you kind of go, no, I don't have to be motivated to do that. That's just something I do. Come rain, come shine. There's a famous artist. His name is Chuck Close. And often Chuck Close is asked, how do you find inspiration for your artwork? And his answer to that is legendary. He says, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us get up and go to work. I love that. He's like saying, it doesn't matter whether you're inspired or not. You just get in there and start drawing or start your photography project, and often inspiration will come in the process. Inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us get up and we go to work. And so I love that in respect to the 20-mile march. So let's end where we began with this conversation with Fred Rogers. His opening song was the same year after year after year. It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. It's a beautiful day for a neighbor. Would you mind the whole entrance drill? At the end of his show, he would reverse the whole order, where he'd put his dress shoes back on, hang up the sweater, put on the dress coat. But his closing song changed a few times over the years. But at the end of his run, the closing song that he would use at his program, the lyrics went like this. And I'll be back when the day is new. And I'll have more ideas for you. And you'll have things you want to talk about. I will too. And that was a promise. I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll be back. And he was back for 33 years, looking into a television camera and guiding kids. I'm in a rut at church. After a closing illustration, conclusion to my message, I often pray, and then my final words are a lot of times, we'll see you next week. We'll see you next week. We'll see you next week. People live in a world where family members might flake out and bail. They live in a world where companies merge and then close departments and then disappear. And that's just kind of my promise, my way of saying, I'll be back. I'll be back. I'll be back. So a closing question for you is just, where in your life do you need to re-up? Do you need to latch onto, once again, a discipline that maybe you let fade? A practice or a relationship where you're simply willing to say, again and again, I'll be back. I'll be back. Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah to Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah to Bethel to Gilgal to Mizpah. I'll be back. May our gracious God guide us in the faithful life. May He stir us, and may He empower us, and may He guide us as we give our lives away. In the name of Jesus, who gave His life for us. Amen.